is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Almost 3 decades ago, Rosa DeLauro first ran for Congress, and she's won every election since in Connecticut's 3rd District. And while the Democratic Party still stands for progressive issues like economic and social equality and health care for all, its members in the U.S. House don't always agree on the way to achieve that for all Americans, especially since the 2018 elections. Today, Where We Live, we sit down with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro to talk about her priorities and the issues she believes matter most to her constituents. Are you one of them? Her congressional district covers all of New Haven County, also Stratford and the city of Middletown. What questions do you have for her? We want you to join the conversation this hour. The number is 888-720-WNPR. That's 888-720-9677, or you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Representative DeLauro is sitting across from me here at our studio at Gateway Community College in New Haven. Congresswoman, it's so nice to sit down with you today.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you. I'm looking forward to the conversation and to the questions.
So there's a lot to cover, so let's just get right into it. Let's talk about NAFTA. You're one of the lawmakers negotiating with the White House on an agreement to replace NAFTA. Still needs congressional approval. I understand you did not originally support the initial NAFTA. So what were your concerns back then, and how are you working those into your negotiations today?
Thanks very, very much, because, this is, you talked about 3 decades, so I've been in the Congress for a while, but I went to the Congress after having, studied the issue on the NAFTA, the North America Free Trade Agreement, and concluded that it was going to just allow for the outsourcing of our jobs, mainly to Mexico, and that it would put American workers at a disadvantage, and Connecticut workers. And I voted against it and spoke out against it. It was one of the leaders in helping to try to defeat it. We were unsuccessful at doing that, and I don't take any pride in saying this, but in fact, we lost almost 1 million jobs as a result of the NAFTA agreement, about 100,000 in our state of Connecticut. So that being said, with the opportunity to look at how we might renegotiate NAFTA, I've been very, very much involved in that effort, including being asked by the Speaker of the House, Speaker Pelosi, to sit on a 9-member working group to engage in the negotiations with the administration. So fundamentally, there are 4 areas which we focused our attention on that we believe need to be addressed and changed in some fundamental ways, and that in fact it ought to be part of the agreement itself and not in any side agreements. Those are labor standards, to outline what are labor standards for working Americans and what is going to allow them to succeed and to have economic security. The enforcement of those standards. In fact, you can put a whole lot of wonderful ideas or principles on a piece of paper, but unless you have an enforcement mechanism, which the current renegotiated NAFTA does not have, that we have to, really have to have an enforcement mechanism. I want to mention the issue of pharmaceutical drugs, because this is a very, very, very big issue. The public cares deeply about lowering the cost of prescription drugs. And what this agreement does is provide a gift to the pharmaceutical industry. How does it do that? It allows them to have a 10-year patent exclusivity on biologic drugs. They're the most expensive drugs. They're the ones today where you can get treatment for cancer and other illnesses, which cost $150,000 a year. 10-year patent exclusivity locks in those prices. It also says that we're going to expand the definition of these drugs, thereby driving prices of prescription drugs here as well as overseas. Once this goes into effect, we have no recourse course, in order to address that with our own laws. So we've got labor standards, enforcement of those standards, environmental standards, and the issue of prescription drugs.
Thank you for fitting that all in, Congresswoman. We're getting a tweet from Mara. She writes, Chairman Neal, who represents Springfield's also on the working group. She and Larson have served have closed the gap on 2 of 4 issues. She wants to know which ones, and is there anything a new NAFTA could do to stop outsourcing to Mexico?
Well, the fact is, first I would just say is we haven't closed the door on any issue yet. We just received back the information from the USTR. It's being reviewed, and we will know better of what they're suggesting. So nothing has been closed yet. Just let me make that a statement. What was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
She wants to know anything a new NAFTA could do to stop outsourcing to Mexico.
Oh, sure, absolutely, which is why what we're trying to do is to enforce labor standards not only here but in Mexico. Mexico just initiated a reform program because Mexicans are being paid like $1.50, $2 an hour, which in fact drives our own businesses, which happen to take their jobs to Mexico. So if we can't deal with enforced standards in Mexico, we are going to continue to put our workers at grave risk.
Vice President Pence has been traveling around trying to get more Democratic support for this new NAFTA, hoping to get an agreement by the end of the year. I mean, how close are you? Is this something that you think can be figured out?
Look, it's not a question of a timeline. The issue is, if we have addressed these issues, if we made changes, if we've been responsive to the requests, then we will move forward. You know, the issue has been we want to get to yes. Some people want to characterize, and I think the Vice President does this, and there are others who say, you know, there's some of us who will never get to yes. Well, that is untrue. The fact is we've been working very hard, very constructively with the U.S. Trade Representative to come to a place where we can see some agreement. But I will tell you this. If this renegotiated NAFTA is nothing more than throwing in a little bit here and a little bit there, does it make fundamental changes which put American workers at the center of the benefits that we derive out of trade, and which we should have trade, we should derive benefits for our country, but for our workers in particular.
I want to, before we move on from NAFTA, you tried visiting an American factory in Mexico. You were turned away. So tell us about that visit.
Absolutely.
And what do we know about standards?
Well, it was a wonderful visit, and we went down. There were a group of us, 4 of us from the working committee were on the trip. We had asked the Goodyear company. Goodyear is an American firm with a subsidiary in Mexico. And quite frankly, they have engaged in unfair labor practices where there were some Mexican workers who tried to make changes there and get a higher pay, etc. And they were promised that their labor action would not put them in jeopardy. Well, lo and behold, Goodyear fired 57 of these workers. We tried to get in. We were denied access. We went to the plant. It was really very interesting and a little bit humorous. They had all of these people out front, you know, at the gate and telling us that we couldn't get in and why we couldn't get in, etc. Subsequently, we've written to Goodyear and hoping that we can sit down with them. It is an American company. We are members of Congress. We have the right to go into that plant and get a look at what the conditions are and what are they doing in terms of protecting workers and providing them with adequate pay.
You're hearing Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro here on Where We Live as we broadcast from New Haven at Gateway Community College. We're talking with her about her district, the 3rd District. If you're one of her constituents, you can join our conversation. You can ask her a question at 888-720-9677. And as always, find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Judy's calling from Middletown. Judy, go ahead. Judy, are you there? Well, I can't hear Judy, so hoping to get her her call in when we can actually hear her level. But let's get into what she's actually. I can see that she wanted to talk about health care. Let's talk about health care. That was a big issue last night during the Democratic presidential debate. Candidates, we know Senator Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, they have issues with taking private insurance completely out of the picture. There's also positions from Vice President Biden. He wants to continue to build on the Affordable Care Act. Where do you stand on how health care needs to be reformed in this country?
First of all, health care is a very, very big issue. It continues to be a big issue, and that is because of cost and accessibility. And people have the high premiums, high deductibles, and high cost of prescription drugs, and people cannot afford it, and they can't afford the medications that they need in order to survive. So I was a strong proponent, still am a strong proponent of the Affordable Care Act, and helped to lead the fight to get it passed. Right now, I believe we have to move forward. I have introduced legislation. It's called Medicare for America, and it provides us a path to universal health care, which I think is where we need to go now. And what it does is it says, yes, let's build on Medicare, include Medicaid, include a CHIP program, but recognizing that we've got about 165 million people in this country who get their insurance through employer-sponsored insurance. I'm not going to abandon those folks and overnight tell them that, this is, we're not making this change, that you can opt to keep your employer-sponsored insurance. You could opt to go into Medicare for America. Your employer could opt to put employees into Medicare for America, but would have to pay 8% of the payroll into the fund in order to provide for it. What it does, it is a path to universal care. It has it auto-enrolls people from birth. There are no deductibles. The premiums are on a sliding scale. It addresses the issue of prescription drugs and bringing down those costs, and has a extremely robust benefits package as well, and it looks to how it can be paid for as well. So I think of what is exciting about this moment is not being in an adversarial position about one position or another, but that we are talking in the United States about moving toward universal health care, and that needs to have a robust debate and discussion. I, for one, at the moment, it's talking about yes, building on Medicare, but also maintaining an employer-sponsored insurance program.
We're going to try Judy again. Judy's calling from Middletown. Judy, are you there? Oh, it doesn't look like we can hear Judy. Judy, I'll give you one more try. Judy, are you there? Oh, there you go.
Hi, Judy.
Hi.
Wonderful. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Congresswoman DeLauro.
My name is Rosa. Go for
Hey,
it.
Rosa.
Hi.
Hi, Lucy. I have a quick question about health care. I'm one of those underinsured people, and I am really wondering, where are the doctors' voices in this and the AMA's voices in the health care? I don't hear from them at all. In fact, what I do see is a lot of these big affiliate businesses like pro-health physicians popping up, and then the doctors make contracts with them, and then they start putting barriers to health care and deciding, what, like a wellness visit, what it could provide and what it can't provide. But the doctors just, every time I go to the doctors, I ask them, they say, oh yeah, it's bad, but they either don't care or they don't have a voice. I don't get that part.
Well, I don't know if you heard what I just said a moment ago. I think we need to move in the direction of, as I say, universal health care with, a combination of Medicare, Medicaid, the CHIP program, enrolling people from birth, providing a substantial package of benefits for people, and no surprise billing for folks, no two-tiered levels of health care, and of making sure that we are looking at people who have disabilities. It's very strong on including disabilities and long-term care and bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. I think that's the direction that we need to go in, and we need to have that debate. I am hopeful that we will have, doctors' voices in this, the debate and in the discussion. It took me 2 years to put together this piece of legislation, of which we've gotten tremendous support. Actually, he used to talk about it, but one of the candidates for the presidential election, Beto O'Rourke, talks about Medicare for America, which was introduced by myself and my colleague Jan Schakowsky. Everybody needs to be at the table. That includes the doctors, the hospitals, but we have to have a process in place that doesn't create the problems that exist now, that people cannot afford health insurance. They can't afford the deductibles, and therefore they're going without.
All of this sounds great, but in terms of actually making progress, getting past the insurance lobby, where they are thinking about their profits. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, when can we get past this gridlock? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, I think, honestly, I think we get caught up in our own conversations here. Everybody is talking about how we move to universal care, whether it is, as people have talked about, Medicare for all, My Medicare for America, a buy-in, allowing people to buy into Medicare, having a public option. We try to do that in the state of Connecticut in this past legislative session. We are getting to a point at which it will move forward. What we need, you have to set the table on this. This is not going to happen without a presidential direction, because this comes from the top down, like the Affordable Care Act did. And you are listening to Democratic candidates who are talking very substantially about how we do achieve affordable health care for everyone in this country and not excluding anyone.
How do you reconcile? There are some Democrats in the House. You're familiar with the Squad, where they see, your ideas being more moderate, and they want to make sure that health care for all really means cutting back on all private insurance. Why not that plan?
There are different iterations of moving forward, and I appreciate my colleagues, and I welcome them. They're smart, they're energetic, they have great ideas, and we ought to, again, this is not a time to be adversarial. The stakes are too high for the American people. We need to understand that what is going to be the best direction for people to get everyone to have health care, because if everyone is covered, you drive down the costs. If you talk about prescription drugs and bringing those costs down, if you include the costs of long-term care, people with disabilities, and that we need to address those concerns in order to have a health care system that really meets the needs of the public today.
You can join our conversation with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Speaking of the Squad, another issue that they're pushing for that you have said that may not be the right direction, and that is a tweet from Max, who writes, Congressman Jim Himes is the only member of Connecticut's House delegation to officially come out in support of impeaching the president. Will you join your colleague and call for the president to be impeached?
I will wait to see what the investigations continue to turn up. I just might say that I have no illusions about the transgressions of this president and the implications of the Russian interference, all of the pieces of this that are on the table, whether it's violation of the emoluments clause. But I think that that's why we have a Judiciary Committee. Those investigations are underway. We will see where they would lead. In the meantime, the issues that I hear about and that people care about is health care, prescription drugs, how to deal with student loans? How do we, in fact, the biggest economic issue we have today are people in jobs that do not pay them enough to meet the rising costs of whether those are health care, education, child care, etc. I want to focus on those issues. We are people who can walk and chew gum at the same time. The investigations are underway, and that will go where it may, and nothing is off the table. But I, for one, want to respond to the issues that my constituents ask me about all of the time. And that's where I will focus my time and attention. In the short term, in the longer term, we will see where it goes. I have no fear of where it would go, but let us, today, people don't even know what bills have been passed in the House of Representatives. The media is consumed with the impeachment issue. It's an important issue.
Is it just the media, though? I mean, you don't think that there are Democrats in the state of Connecticut that are your constituents?
Oh, yeah,
no,
it's not. But I think that there. But I think that that's not the only thing they care about. But quite frankly, you cannot talk about issues that were covered on the national press. Thank God for the debates in some way. We've listened to all kinds of issues that come up. I don't know if people know that in terms of equal pay for equal work, that the House of Representatives passed that bill that says men and women in the same job deserve the same pay, or that we passed a bill that said we need to have background checks, or that I passed an appropriations bill that for the first time in 20 years says let's look at gun violence research. I put $50 million into the appropriations bill to look at these issues of gun violence. The public needs to know what is going on. At the same time, they need to understand where we come from on the issue of impeachment.
You're hearing Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro here on Where We Live. We're going to continue our discussion with Congresswoman DeLauro. You can join us, too. The number 888-720-9677, or you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. My guest is Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. She's represented Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District for 28 years. Are you one of her constituents? What questions do you have for her? The number 888-720-9677 or 888-720-9677. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Before the break, Congresswoman, you mentioned that many Americans don't know what bills are being passed in Congress because there is such a fervor around whether or not Congress will move to impeach the president, especially after what Special Counsel Mueller has uncovered in his investigation. But I'm just curious, part of why there are people that are pushing to see their lawmakers like yourself support impeachment is because they're very concerned about the direction the country is moving. Looking at the rollbacks of the Trump administration of maybe initiatives and laws that President Obama passed. We can just look at immigration and the many different policies that are being rolled out by President Trump. And so I'm just curious, what is the climate in D.C.? It sounds like you're frustrated that there is work being done, but it's all being overshadowed because of this feeling that some believe the president should not be in office based on that investigation.
Well, the president doesn't have to be in office if we vote the way we should vote in November of 2020. The process is we're going to vote him out of office. He shouldn't be there. He is rolling back all of the gains that we've made over the years, and I believe that we are fighting for the soul of our country, and that's what these elections are all about. Keep in mind that the House could move on impeachment. The Senate is never going to get there. So you will have an individual who we can vote out of office, view himself and maybe his constituents and his supporters view him as a martyr to a cause. I want to vote him out of office, and I will do everything that I can over the next several months to win back the United States Senate, to continue to have the majority in the House, and to turn him out of the White House. He doesn't deserve to be there.
And if President Trump is reelected in 2020, what then?
I don't believe he will be. He will not be reelected in 2020. I might just add to that, I'm interested in some of the calls where people have, one of the first times that people have called Rosa DeLauro a moderate. So, I mean, this is really very pretty
one of the reasons we definitely wanted to speak to you today.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I love it. So.
Because you see that your constituents, again, are more concerned about what's happening in their everyday and not the bickering in Washington.
Well, they're concerned about the bickering in Washington because they want us to get things done. And they're absolutely right about that. What's happened to a number of the bills, because someone could ask this question and they would be absolutely right, we're passing legislation in the House, $15 minimum wage, as I said, paycheck fairness, background checks, the Equality Act, all these things. But they are being stopped in the Senate by Mitch McConnell, who self-describes as the Grim Reaper, which is pretty extraordinary, but will not move on any of the legislation. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't go forward and make the fight on these issues, because I think the public needs to know what is happening. And that I view as part of my job, is to let people know what is going on and what are the issues that I'm fighting for.
John's calling from Milford. John, go ahead. You're on Where We Live.
Yes, hi. Rosa, thank you for your service, and you're our champion here in Connecticut.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was wondering why the Democrats are not saying anything about the voter suppression and the stealing of a Supreme Court judge from the Democrats and so on and so forth. It feels like a Republican coup to me, because Hillary Clinton had 3 million more votes in this country than Trump did, and she lost the election because of our electoral college, which is supposed to be smarter than the voters and vote for the person that belongs there. And all the Republicans before Trump was nominated said that he wasn't fit to be president. So what's going on here?
Thank you, John. Let's have Congressman DeLauro answer that question.
First of all, John, thank you so much. And Milford is a special place for me. I'm a proud graduate of the Academy of Our Lady of Mercy, Laurelton Hall in Milford, and so it's wonderful. And I thank you for your kind words. One of the points I made earlier was that so much of what is happening in the, particularly in the House of Representatives, is not moving, is not in the public domain. Because other issues are being discussed. The very fact of the matter is, you are so right about voter suppression. But in fact, there is a very energetic and aggressive effort to look into this, to do something about it, to preclude what happened in places, even on tribal lands with Native Americans, in Georgia and other places. And in fact, what is happening, we're speaking up loudly on the issue of Russia hacking into our electoral system, with the concern of what could happen in upcoming elections. In fact, we even have appropriated money for investigations into that effort, and quite frankly, the administration and my Republican colleagues, that money hasn't been used yet to deal with these with these issues. So there are attempts. Should there be more aggressive? Absolutely. We cannot allow. The vote is sacred. It really is. So many people have fought and died to be able to vote in our country. And we cannot let any group of folks deny people the right to vote.
Tom's calling from Manchester. Tom, you're on Where We Live.
Yes.
Go ahead with your question.
Yes. Good morning, Representative DeLauro. Questions that haven't been answered had to do with homelessness, poverty, and affordability. And as an African American, I feel, regardless of race, these are bread and butter issues that need to be looked at with hunger, because people are still suffering. And my second point is dealing with racist domestic violence, now that we're calling it as it is, not just with Islamic violence, but Ku Klux Klan and other hate groups, and even with the president, what he's shooting off his mouth as, I find it objectionable. We shouldn't be going back to 1959, but this is 2019. We should be pulling together as all Americans, and that one race should not be over the other, or for gender for that matter. And I'm a product of the civil rights, in a way, going through college, and I lived through Dr. King's assassination, so I'm a beneficiary of it, and I'm not going to, be subservient to, anyone. And I think for decent-minded whites together, we need to pull together and saying that the world doesn't belong to one race, but to all of us.
Well, thank you, Tom. I want to have Congresswoman DeLauro answer your question about homelessness and poverty. People are still struggling.
Tom, your comments are very, very poignant, and these are fundamental issues. These are the fundamental values of this of this country, where look, I'm a product of the civil rights, era as well, and you think about it, we did pass civil rights legislation in this country. We've passed legislation that tries to address these issues, and I would just say this, and I want to talk about homelessness and poverty, but for a second, is that I have the privilege, and I'm blessed in the job that I have. My role is to reach out, to engage with people, with all people. I have a responsibility as a leader. I have a responsibility in my conversation with others. And I will just say flat out that we have a president who divides a country, pits one group against another, spews rhetoric that creates hate. That's not what this country is about. And we have tried to fight back and not create an environment where it's okay to denigrate people and call people names. That being said, that's why I'm going to fight as hard as I can to elect a Democratic president in 2020. That being said, poverty and homelessness. And you also mentioned, Tom, SNAP. If you know anything about me, I sit on the committee that oversees all of the nutrition programs. I have been one of the strongest voices for the food stamp program. In my congressional district, the 3rd district, 1 out of 7 people are food insecure. That means they do not know where their next meal is coming from. That's an abomination. Homelessness, poverty. And when you look at people who want to destroy the social safety net that both Democrats and Republicans have built up over the years, that said, yes, when it comes to unemployment benefits, we need to do something about that. When we have homelessness, we need to take a look at where our housing is and what kinds of opportunities are we going to give to people to have a decent home. We passed in 1949 a housing bill that said everybody should have a decent home. And I might add, in terms of Democrats and Republicans, it was Jacob Javits, a Republican from New York, who wrote that bill. So in this country, and I wrote a book about 3 years ago that was The Least Among Us, Waging the Battle for the Vulnerable. And what I found in the creation of a social safety net, and that had to do with homelessness, with poverty, with a SNAP program, with a child tax credit program, and other areas, Democrats and Republicans came together to overcome these challenges, to help to make a difference in the lives of people today. That with technology and with innovation and with entrepreneurship, which is at the basis of our country, that we have an obligation and a responsibility, a moral responsibility, to make sure that we do not leave people behind. That's where I focus my time and attention.
Congresswoman, you mentioned SNAP, the Trump administration attempting to change the rules for eligibility. How would that impact your district specifically? What do we know about in terms of income eligibility?
It will be, first of all, the number of children who will be jettisoned from a school lunch a program, of hundreds of thousands of youngsters in our state. Just it really is unspeakable that we would that we would have an administration that would take food out of the mouths of children and families. The people who are on the food stamp program, the SNAP program, are those who are disabled, seniors, and children. That's the bulk of the people who are on the food stamp program. It would have a unbelievable detrimental effect in my district, but in our state. We have great groups like End Hunger Connecticut, who I work with, and we are fighting back to make sure. They could not get where they wanted to go through the farm bill that was passed. So now that the administration has come around in another direction, but we are going to fight back, and we're not going to let them do it.
Before we head to break, there is rhetoric that there is fraud involved. What do we know? Evidence at all that there is fraud from people that are on SNAP?
The lowest level of fraud in any program is in the food stamp program. Let's take a look. I would just move to other. We provide agricultural subsidies, not to our small farmers in Connecticut that we have, but big agribusiness. We provide subsidies for the oil and gas industry, where there are with regard to the nutrition programs, there are income thresholds. There are asset thresholds that you can't go beyond, so that you're not eligible for the program if you don't meet these standards. With some of the other crop subsidy programs that we provide to the middle of this country with big agribusiness, you do not have any income thresholds. You do not have any asset thresholds. We have 26 people in the United States today, and we can't find out who they are, who get over $1 million in a subsidy for the crop insurance program, and they don't have to follow any standards or requirements or regulations. It's wrong. The system has been rigged against middle income, low income, middle class people in this country. And the beneficiaries of so many of these subsidies are the people who are at the top. That has to change.
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro here on Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. You can join our conversation, 888-720-9677. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll continue our conversation in just a little bit. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We're broadcasting from our New Haven studios at Gateway Community College. My guest today, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. She's been representing the 3rd District here in Connecticut for 28 years. That's a long time. Do you think that you'll be stepping aside anytime soon to let someone new come up to represent the 3rd District?
Well, I'll let the 3rd District folks make that determination. I love what I do. I'm blessed with what I would do. I'm the daughter of an immigrant family, could only dare dream that their daughter would serve in the United States House of Representatives. I am always humbled by the opportunity that they have and that the people of the 3rd Congressional District give me. And I've been fortunate, and then over the years they have supported me and continue to do so with increasing margins, and I hope they will continue to do that and to believe that my view of my job is that I am their advocate, and I am there to fight for them and for their families, and I will, continue to do that. I think they also know about me that I'm not afraid to stand up. I'm not afraid to take on those special interests that, in my view, have rigged the system against middle-class families and working families today.
So when 2020 comes, you'd hope to seek re-election?
I would. Yes, I would.
We talked just briefly about all these immigration policies, these administrative changes coming down the line from the Trump administration. So much attention on the southern border, Congresswoman DeLauro. A very contentious issue being money diverted from initiatives and things that could help Connecticut residents towards this idea of a border wall. Can you talk about that?
Certainly. There were two pieces of it. The last piece of which you mentioned, which we were going to have a substantial fight about, is in the appropriations process. I am the chair of the Labor, Education, and Health Subcommittee of Appropriations. And the resources in this subcommittee are 1/3 of the programs are 1/3 of the discretionary dollars that we have, the non-defense dollars that we spend. So it's substantial. It focuses on every part of a family's life. Is it education from preschool to post-secondary education? It's all about mental health. It's about workforce programs, apprenticeship programs, training. It's the National Institutes of Health. It's the Center for Disease Control. Long and the short of every aspect, Pell Grants, every aspect of people's lives. It would appear that what the Senate is going to do, we passed our bill where we increased funding in all of these areas that I've talked about. Very, very proud of the bill, including the money for gun violence research, prevention research. The Senate would appear that they're going to at least short changes of about $5 billion in order to provide funding for a medieval concept of a wall which no one supports except the vanity of the President of the United States. And we can't sit around and allow that to happen. That is unacceptable because, in fact, it will mean less Head Start slots for our children, less funding for a Pell Grant to allow a child to go to school. The opportunities for job training will be curtailed, a cutback on mental health services that we have. I can't go down the whole list because there's the volume of it is, and what that would do to shortchange people. It's not programs. It's about the people that are served by these efforts. So it's unacceptable, and we will make that fight.
Well, what would you say to listeners who are concerned when they hear or read on the news, see on the cable news networks the amount of undocumented immigrants that are coming into the country, and they're concerned about America again footing the bill to help them despite fleeing violence, fleeing terrible conditions that nobody would want to live under. So what would be the solution to deal with people who are coming into this country and are looking for some type of status without just immediately kicking them out, which is what the Trump administration is looking to do and it has been doing?
Well, it's you've got two very serious issues here. One is overall immigration policy and legal immigration and illegal immigration. And we need to have legislation that deals with a broken immigration system, which we have. Now, you may recall, if your listeners may recall, that in the United States Senate, they passed a comprehensive immigration legislation several years ago, at the time sponsored by John McCain, Pat Leahy. Democrats, Republicans came together. It was a strong bill, very tough bill, and they passed it because they understood that challenge that we have to deal with this system. It was never, ever any piece of it brought up in the House of Representatives for a vote. It was stopped in the House of Representatives by my Republican colleagues. So, do we need to, to reform our immigration system? Without question. But we do not need to make it. It's a serious issue. It is not a political issue, which is what some people would like to do, is to politicize it. The second part of that is because you mentioned the southern border, and the committee that I chair has jurisdiction over what they are called unaccompanied children who come to the United States, and they come when they come unaccompanied, they are in the custody of the Health and Human Services agency. Health and Human Services is not what Homeland Security is. Homeland Security is an immigration enforcement agency. When the unaccompanied child comes, they come into, it's a child welfare system, if you will. The responsibility is to identify a sponsor, a foster home, a shelter for this child to be moved to in the shortest possible time. That's where the administration really initiated what I called state-sponsored child abuse. That's where they separated families, creating an unbelievable problem. That's where they initiated policies which ground the movement of these children from unaccompanied status into with a sponsor, a foster parent, or into a shelter. They ground it to a halt.
I don't want to run out of time without asking you a public health issue that has sprung up in recent weeks, and that is vaping. Reports in states, including here in Connecticut, of people getting this mysterious respiratory illness. You're calling for a ban on all e-cigarettes.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
I will. In fact, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. 6 people have died. 450 people fallen ill. 33 states due to e-cigarette use. Connecticut, which you talked about, 11 cases, 7 Fairfield County, 3 in New Haven County, 1 in New London County. So, and this is the reports, including seizures, are linked to e-cigarettes. And I have a press conference this morning. We're told to talk about this issue because I have called for a ban on e-cigarettes. Why is that? I have been dealing with this issue for a number of months because my committee has jurisdiction over the Food and Drug Administration. And yes, they moved to say they're going to talk about banning flavors. I talked about that last January and have legislation with regard to that. The fact of the matter is the FDA is a regulatory agency. We now have indications that this product is causing people to be ill or to die. They're on the market illegally. What we did in 2009 is said that e-cigarettes had to go through something called a pre-market review. That means that their health and safety had to be reviewed before they could come to the market. The FDA sidestepped that. And so the product is on the market illegally, and until we know whether it is safe or not safe for people and not putting them at risk, they should be off the market.
Just real quickly, we know that guns in America also a public health issue. Right. You are pushing to appropriate money for the CDC to research gun violence as a public health issue. Any chance that this could get through the Senate? Just with a couple of minutes left.
We're going to fight to the death to make sure it happens.
Again, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, there's a lot to cover with your representation of the 3rd District, what's happening in Washington. Tomorrow you're going to actually be hosting Speaker Pelosi in New Haven about equal pay for equal work. You're someone who is a close confidant of Ms. Pelosi.
Longtime friend.
And a longtime friend. You're happy with the leadership that she has shown?
Strong, tough, understands the issues. Strategic, master legislator, and has brought our caucus together and moving forward. We are going to do a policy forum on men and women in the same job, same pay, because we have passed it in the House. It's being held up in the Senate by Mitch McConnell. No reason. And we had Republican support in the House to pass this. And so we're working closely together with the Speaker to put pressure on the Senate to pass this legislation.
And I wanted to ask you a quick question. Adelaide had called in. We didn't have time to go to her. She just wants to know, will you co-sponsor Resolution 763? It's the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. What can you say about that?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all,
in under a minute.
In under a minute, I will be very, very happy to look at it. A strong proponent of a part of the effort on Green New Deal. And looking at climate change as being one of the biggest problems that we have today. It's a critical and it's a crisis. I'll take a look at the legislation and make a determination. Happy to do that, Adelaide. Thank you.
And you said earlier, voting is a basic right. It's something that we shouldn't take for granted. We just finished up a primary where you see towns and cities less than 20% voter turnout. What does that say about people's trust in democracy?
Oh, I think it's unfortunate. I really do, because of what it means to cast a vote. I was in South Africa for the election of Nelson Mandela, and I spoke to a young man who had been in line all night long to be able to cast his vote. And I said, why? Why did you do that? And he said to me, if I get to cast my vote and something happens to me when I leave this place, I will have at least voted once will have had the opportunity to vote once in my lifetime. Americans need to understand the preciousness of that vote and how important it is.
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time to be on Where We Live.
Appreciate it. I love it. It's wonderful. Look forward to talking to you again, Lucy.
I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today's show produced by Carmen Baskoff. Thanks to Jonathan McNichol, who was our technical producer, and Lydia Brown on the phones. Have a great weekend.